How do you make selections in Photoshop with the selection brush tool? What is the selection brush tool? Well, this is a new tool in Photoshop that uses painting instead of the traditional selection tools. This can be really great for generative fill and other intuitive ways of selecting to add objects or to remove objects with a painting motion rather than something more like the pen tool or the quick selection tool that uses marching ants and can be hard to see. Where is the selection brush tool in Photoshop? It's under the lasso tool. So if you click and hold on the lasso tool, you can also press Shift L to cycle through all the lasso tools. Once you have the selection brush tool selected, you're ready to start painting. Simply paint on your canvas and it'll make a selection. If I switch to another selection tool, it becomes marching ants. If I go back to the selection brush tool in Photoshop, I still get this painted edge. Let's go ahead and look up at the top for the options. Here, there's a choice between add and subtract. You can also use Alt or Option on your keyboard to toggle. You can change the opacity. In addition, you can also feather the edge. This is a really powerful feature. So if I take this down and now I start painting, I have a much softer edge. Put that down to almost nothing. And I have this nice soft edge, but it is actually a selection. So even though this selection has just the marching ants, it has a feathered edge. So this is a really great feature of the selection brush tool. To deselect, just press Ctrl D to deselect. To change your brush size, use the bracket keys on your keyboard. Here I have a large selection painted. If I hold the Alt or Option key, I can take away from that selection. This is a little bit more clumsy than some of the other precise selection tools, such as Quick Select or the Pen tool, but it's meant for quick, intuitive selection and painting. One thing you can use it for is to quickly remove objects with generative fill. So, for example, say I wanted to remove this seam ripper, I could just lower my brush size down, paint over the seam ripper, click generative fill, and then generate. Then Photoshop removes that with the generative fill and it puts it right inside a layer mask. If I look over here at this part of the screen, you can see that it is using this as a layer mask and everything is linked together. So that's a really great way for using the selection brush tool with Adobe Photoshop and Generative Fill for quick, intuitive selections. Hopefully this helps you use the selection brush tool in Photoshop. How do you use the lasso tool in Photoshop to make selections? In Photoshop, making selections is everything, and the lasso tool is a really great way to make quick selections and not have to worry about too much. The lasso tool is located in the toolbar, right up here under the marquee select tool. If you don't see it, just click and hold, and you can see the other lasso tools, and you can select the one you want. In addition, you can also press Shift L to cycle through the lasso tools. I'm going to use the Freehand Lasso tool right now. It's as simple as drawing a circle, and it'll automatically close and have the marching ants. If I press V to get the transform tool, I can now move this selection. Control or Command Z undoes that. When using the lasso tool, if you need to add to your selection, for example, I don't have all of this ruler, I can hold the Shift key, and as long as my new selection overlaps the other selection, it'll add to it. In fact, you can even have a selection that doesn't overlap, and it'll add to that selection as well. If you need to remove a selection, hold the Alt or Option key, and it will subtract from the selection. This can be really great because you can go fast and adjust your selections on the fly. At the very top of the lasso tool, you can change the feather. So if I want to add a feather to the selection, I can type in a pixel value and it'll add that feather and have a soft edge. Press Ctrl D or Command D to deselect. Hopefully this allows you to use the Freehand Lasso tool in Photoshop. How do you use the Polygon Lasso tool in Photoshop to make selections? The Polygon Lasso tool is a basic selection tool in Photoshop, but it's very powerful when you use it for the appropriate things. Where is the Polygon Lasso tool in Photoshop? If you look up at the toolbar and you see the lasso tools, click and hold, and then you can select the Polygon Lasso tool. You can also press Shift L to cycle through the different lasso tools. Once you have the Polygon Lasso tool selected, you can click and select straight lines. So this is really good when you're working on a grid and you just need to get straight lines and have a quick selection. Double click to close the selection, and now I can use the transform tools to move this around. Press Ctrl D or Command D to deselect. One nice thing with the Polygon Lasso tool is I can click an origin. So I'm going to start, for example, I can start right here, then I can move over. And if I hold shift, notice that complete horizontal line. Then I can click here and I can move down this line. So I can go to this vertical line or I can go in increments of 45 degrees. So then I can come down to here, click, come straight back over to here, click, and then back up to the top. When you see that circle right there, that means it's ready to close the lasso tool. Now I have a selection and I can do anything I do with all my selection tools in Photoshop. You can click deselect or press Ctrl D or Command D to deselect. Let's look at another nice feature of the Polygon Lasso tool. For example, say I wanted to work on this seam ripper right here. I could click the Polygon Lasso tool and then I could click here, but now I have a problem. It's all straight. What if I just want to draw a curved line or a freehand line just for a little bit? If you hold Alt or Option, suddenly now I can draw and then let go of Alt and Option. So that can be a great way if you need to have a little bit of an organic line when you're using the Polygon Lasso tool. Once again, I will deselect. Sometimes you get a little bit crazy with the Polygon Lasso tool and you might click way too many times. I really like this original selection, but everything is not ruined. You can just press the delete key and it'll go back one line segment at a time. So that way, when you have your very complicated and intricate Polygon Lasso tool selection in Photoshop, everything is not ruined. You can just press the delete key and step back in time. Hopefully, this allows you to use the Polygon Lasso tool in Photoshop to make selections very quickly. How do you use the magnetic lasso tool in Photoshop to make selections? Where is the magnetic lasso tool? If you look up at the toolbar in the top left, you'll see the Freehand Lasso tool. Click and hold on the toolbar. You can see the magnetic lasso tool and it has this little magnet. You can also press Shift L to cycle through the lasso tools. Once you have it selected, up at the top, you'll notice that there's some options. We have the feather, like many of the lasso tools. We also have width and contrast and frequency. Width defines where the magnetic lasso tool will look for edges. This can be changed with the bracket keys on your keyboard, just like changing brush size. Contrast tells the magnetic lasso tool how to decide if it actually exists. So if you have something that's high contrast, you actually want to make this up. If you have something that's a little bit more fuzzy or muted, perhaps a lower contrast will work. The frequency is how many pixels apart are the little anchor points that keep everything together. Every selection you make with the magnetic lasso tool will be different, so you'll have to adjust these as you go. Let's look at the lasso tool on this screwdriver. One nice trick is if you press caps lock, you can see where it's going to search for an edge. So if I have it very large, it's going to look for edges wherever this is. So now it doesn't see an edge, but it's trying to do something. So it says it's there. And this isn't going to be very good. So we'll just close it out. Press Control or Command D to deselect. Let's try this again. This time I'm going to make the edge width a little bit smaller so I can see where it's looking for the edge. I'll click and I don't have to hold down. I can just now drag along the edge here and then see how the lasso tool snaps to the edges. I can go across and it's trying its best to figure out where the edge of my form is. Notice that it's only looking where the width of the brush is. When you get to the end and you see that circle next to the magnetic lasso tool in Photoshop, just click and it'll make that selection. And of course, you can remove this or simply press delete and it will delete the contents. When using the magnetic lasso tool, it's very easy for it to kind of get out of hand very quickly. For example, if I start using the lasso tool and I just start drawing, you can eventually just keep moving your mouse and you have the lasso tool all over. Don't fret, just double click your mouse, press Ctrl or Command D, and you're fine. But sometimes you're actually in the middle of a selection and you actually want to keep it. Say, for example, I'm trying to select this gold part of this tape and I'm going along and I'm doing great. I have a really nice selection. And then suddenly I go like this. All is not lost. You can press delete and it'll delete the points. So just move your cursor back to where you want your next point to be, delete everything until you get to where you want to go. And also, sometimes it won't drop an anchor point where you want it. You can click the mouse, just like using the pen tool, and it will click and find where those points want to be. So this can be helpful. You can actually make the frequency less and then manually do it, kind of like a hybrid between the pen tool and the freehand lasso tool. So, this is how you use the magnetic lasso tool in Photoshop. Hopefully, you can use it to make selections in your images.